Gratitude is supposed to feel warm, soft, light. That's what every book, every podcast, every well-meaning voice tells you. It's the emotional equivalent of sunlight on skin, simple, effortless, universally healing. At least, that's the story everyone loves to repeat. But if you're honest, there have been days when gratitude didn't feel like sunlight at all. It felt like a stone you were expected to carry quietly, politely, without complaint. The kind of weight that presses on your chest just a little harder each year, until you forget when breathing stopped feeling natural. It often begins young, in subtle ways that seep into your bones before you even realize it. Maybe you grew up hearing, "Be grateful, other people have it worse." Or perhaps your family praised you more for being agreeable than truthful. Gratitude became more than a virtue. It became currency. You learned early that the quickest way to be seen as good was to smile, nod, say thank you, and make sure no one ever thought you wanted too much. That's the part people don't talk about. The conditioning that teaches girls, long before they become women, that desire is dangerous and disappointment is ungrateful. Then adulthood arrives, and the expectations shift shape, but never truly disappear. You land a job that looks respectable from the outside, so you tell yourself you should be grateful, even when it drains the life out of you. You enter relationships where you give more than you receive, but you convince yourself that gratitude should eclipse your loneliness. You build a life that appears full, but inside, the hollowness grows. Gratitude becomes a script you recite, not a feeling you actually recognize. Emily, a woman who could be any of us, once described it perfectly. She said gratitude felt like being handed a bouquet of beautiful flowers while standing in a burning room. Everyone admired the bouquet. People complimented how lucky she was to have it. No one noticed the flames creeping up behind her. Whenever she tried to speak about the smoke, they reminded her how lovely the flowers were. So she learned to choke on the smoke quietly, whispering thank you through the heat. That mixture of sadness and forced optimism, that ache you can't quite name, is something so many women know intimately. There's a strange kind of anger that comes with this, the kind you don't always admit out loud. Not rage at anyone in particular, but at the invisible rules that insist gratitude must sit on top of every other emotion, even the hard ones. Anger at the way women are expected to swallow disappointments whole, then thank the world for serving them. Anger at how natural it becomes to silence your hurt because you fear being seen as dramatic, needy, or ungrateful. No one warns you how corrosive that silence can be, how it festers quietly, disguising itself as tiredness, irritability, numbness, sometimes even shame. And still, there are moments of joy woven through it all. Strange, fleeting bursts that remind you of the gratitude you once knew. Like sunlight trying to cut through storm clouds, the joy of a small kindness, the gentleness of someone really listening, the relief of telling the truth, even once. But the joy rarely lingers, because the pressure returns just as quickly. You feel sunshine for an instant, then you're back to carrying expectations that were never meant for one person. What makes this experience even heavier is how invisible it often is. Gratitude is celebrated so loudly that its shadow, the guilt, the confusion, the emotional exhaustion, barely gets mentioned. Women learn to decorate their lives with the right words while hiding the truth underneath. "I'm grateful for my job," whispered on mornings when you have to force yourself out of bed. "I'm grateful for my relationship," said while swallowing the sting of unmet needs. "I'm grateful for my life," murmured through a quiet fear that you've built something that fits the world, but not your soul. Fear is one of the emotions people rarely admit in this conversation. Fear that if you acknowledge what hurts, life might unravel. Fear that others will judge you. Fear that you might look ungrateful for the very things that are suffocating you. Fear that if you stop performing gratitude, someone might finally see the truth. That you're tired, that you need help, that you can't keep carrying this alone. Fear can twist itself into gratitude so convincingly that you start to confuse the two. And beneath all of that, there is a subtle kind of disgust, not at yourself, but at the distorted version of gratitude you've been taught to wear. It's the disgust of recognizing that something once pure has been turned into a mask, a performance, a responsibility. Gratitude was never meant to suffocate you, but somehow it did. The moment that realization hits, it reshapes everything you thought you knew. That's where the story often shifts, though not dramatically at first. Sometimes it begins with a single uncomfortable question. What if gratitude isn't supposed to feel like pressure? For women like Emily, that question feels like a small crack in a wall that's been holding for years. A breath, a pause, a flicker of curiosity in a life that's been scripted for too long. You feel it not as rebellion, but as relief. For the first time, gratitude stops being a demand and becomes a doorway, one that leads inward instead of outward. When that doorway appears, something unexpected happens. You start to remember the version of gratitude that once felt genuine, before expectations twisted it into obligation. You remember the lightness, the ease, the sincerity. You remember how gratitude used to rise naturally, not from pressure or comparison, but from truth. And even if you haven't felt that in a long time, the memory alone is enough to stir something inside you, something tender, something honest. That's the quiet beginning of everything that follows. The moment when you stop carrying gratitude as weight and begin searching for it as truth. It's subtle, almost fragile, yet powerful enough to shift the ground beneath you. Because once you realize that gratitude was never meant to silence you, you begin to wonder what your life might look like if you allowed yourself to feel everything. Light and shadow, joy and sorrow, thankfulness and longing, without apology. And in that wondering, the story of gratitude becomes something entirely different, something gentler, something real. There's a moment many women don't admit to anyone, not even themselves, when gratitude begins to feel less like a blessing and more like an accusation. It creeps in quietly, usually on days when life demands too much. You tell yourself you should be grateful for the stability, the job, the partner, the home, the health, the opportunities. Yet underneath the polished exterior of thankfulness, something trembles. Something feels off. Something feels wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not catastrophically wrong, but wrong in the subtle, soul-level way that gnaws at you. Emily knew that sensation long before she could name it. After her mother survived a health crisis, everyone expected her to feel thankful, overflowing with relief, radiant with gratitude. People kept telling her, "You must be so grateful she's okay." And she was. A part of her was. But another part, the exhausted one, the scared one, the grieving one, felt heavy. Weeks of caretaking had drained her spirit. She still woke up shaking sometimes, afraid the crisis would repeat. Yet whenever she tried to speak those darker truths, the room stiffened. Friends reassured her she was lucky, as if luck erased exhaustion, as if gratitude and grief couldn't share the same space. The loneliness of holding both inside her created a tension she didn't know how to release. That mixture of sadness and confusion is more common than people think. When gratitude is used to overwrite pain, it becomes a quiet form of self-gaslighting. Not the loud, manipulative kind that outsiders impose, but an internal one, a voice that whispers, "You shouldn't feel this way," every time your emotions refuse to behave. It's heartbreaking how quickly women learn to mistrust their own inner world. They tell themselves they're dramatic. They tell themselves they're sensitive. They tell themselves they're expecting too much. Meanwhile, their bodies tighten, their breath shortens, their eyes dim without explanation. The anger comes later. Not explosive anger, but a slow burn like embers held under the skin. It rises when you realize that the gratitude others demand from you isn't about your well-being, but their comfort. People feel uneasy when women express dissatisfaction or disappointment, especially when everything looks fine. Gratitude becomes a social command. Smile, soften your voice, be pleasant, be thankful. It's as if society only welcomes women when they take up less emotional space. The anger grows when you notice how the world praises women who stay quiet, who endure, who make the best of things, even when the best isn't good at all. Emily began recognizing this pattern in the smallest moments with her partner. He worked long hours, and she managed most of the household responsibilities. Whenever she tried to express tiredness or ask for help, he reminded her, gently but firmly, how fortunate they were, how they had a nice apartment, good salaries, no children to drain them. Gratitude became a shield he used to deflect discomfort. Her exhaustion went unacknowledged, hidden beneath a veneer of, "Shouldn't we be thankful?" It wasn't malicious. He genuinely believed he was offering perspective. But Emily felt herself shrinking. Every attempt to name her needs was swallowed by the expectation to be content. Fear began threading itself into her gratitude. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged as ungrateful, difficult, or demanding. Fear that speaking truth might shatter the delicate harmony she worked so hard to maintain. The fear was subtle but constant, like a low hum vibrating in the background of her life. She worried that if she revealed the depth of her sadness or frustration, something would break. Her relationship, her image, her sense of stability. Gratitude became armor she wore to protect everything around her, even as it bruised her on the inside. And then there was the guilt, woven through every thought. A guilt so familiar it almost felt like instinct. Women carry guilt as if it were stitched into their skin. Guilt for wanting rest, for wanting more, for feeling less than grateful for the things they're supposed to cherish. It's a strange sensation when guilt and gratitude tangle together until you can't separate one from the other. You start thanking the world for things that hurt you, because the guilt tells you it could be worse. You convince yourself that your pain is illegitimate because your blessings should outweigh it. Sometimes the disgust slips in quietly, not directed outward, but inward. You find yourself repulsed by how quickly you ignore your own emotions. You notice how effortlessly you minimize your needs. You realize how often you say it's fine when it isn't. That internal disgust is not self-hatred. It's the early spark of awakening. It's the part of you that knows something in this structure of gratitude is profoundly distorted. It's the small rebellion inside your chest, insisting that you deserve honesty more than performance. Yet even within this turmoil, moments of joy flicker through unexpectedly. A friend who listens without trying to fix you. A night where you allow yourself to cry without explaining why. A fleeting second when your truth escapes you in the middle of a conversation, and instead of being judged, you're held. Those small moments feel like air after months underwater. They don't erase the conflict, but they remind you what authenticity feels like. They remind you that gratitude isn't supposed to demand silence. It's supposed to grow from truth. Emily once described a night when she sat alone on her balcony, letting the city hum beneath her. She stared at the lights of dozens of apartments, imagining stories inside each window: joy, exhaustion, longing, relief. For the first time, she wondered whether all those women behind those windows also carried this quiet, heavy gratitude. Whether they, too, felt the pressure to be thankful for lives that didn't always honor them. The thought brought a wave of sadness and comfort at the same time. Sadness that so many felt this burden. Comfort that she wasn't alone in it. That realization didn't solve anything instantly, but it softened something. Gratitude stopped feeling like a mask she had to keep wearing and started becoming a question she needed to explore. A question that didn't accuse her, but invited her. What if gratitude wasn't meant to silence your struggle? What if it could sit beside your pain without erasing it? What if everything inside you, the joy, the anger, the fear, the disappointment, had a right to exist without apology? That quiet, trembling thought is where transformation begins. There comes a moment, often quiet and unremarkable on the surface, when a woman starts to sense that what she's been taught about gratitude doesn't quite match the truth living inside her. It's like realizing the script she's been reciting her entire life was written by someone else. Someone who never asked what she actually felt. Someone who didn't care whether the words fit her mouth or suffocated her. That moment feels both liberating and unsettling, stirring old emotions she thought she'd buried long ago. Emily reached that moment one afternoon while sitting at her kitchen table, the late sun pouring across the floor. She had been rereading messages from her childhood, notes her mother kept from teachers, neighbors, distant relatives. Almost all of them praised the same traits: polite, sweet, helpful, considerate, grateful. Words meant as compliments suddenly felt like shackles. A strange mix of sadness and resentment crept up in her chest as she realized no one ever celebrated her for being assertive, curious, rebellious, or honest. Those qualities were quietly discouraged, smoothed over, or framed as flaws that needed fixing. Gratitude became the safest expression available to her, the only one that never got her in trouble. There is a deep cultural thread woven into girlhood that rarely gets named. Girls are encouraged to be thankful for what they receive, no matter how little it is. Boys are encouraged to ask for more. Girls are told they're lucky to be chosen. Boys are told to chase what they want. Girls learn that desire is dangerous. Boys learn that desire is strength. By the time a girl becomes a woman, gratitude has already been shaped into obedience, a quiet compliance dressed up as emotional maturity. And even though society has changed in many ways, those lessons linger like whispers inside every decision she makes. As Emily sat there, turning those old notes over in her hands, she felt anger risen. Not destructive anger, but the kind that reveals truth. She realized how much of her life had been molded by expectations she never agreed to. The expectation to endure quietly. The expectation to adjust her reactions so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. The expectation to appreciate what she had, even when it didn't honor her needs. Anger, in that moment, wasn't a sign of ingratitude. It was clarity. It was her body remembering its right to want more. The world has a peculiar way of dressing its constraints in kindness. Gratitude is often used as a tool of social control, but coded in language so soft that resisting it feels immoral. Be thankful you have a job, people say to a woman whose workplace drains her spirit. Be grateful he's a good man, they insist when she confesses she feels unseen in her marriage. You should appreciate what you have, they remind her, when she speaks about dreams she's afraid to pursue. Gratitude becomes a cage disguised as wisdom. The bars are invisible, yet unmistakably present. At the same time, there's a kind of fear intertwined with these expectations. The fear of stepping outside the script. A woman who asks for more risks being labeled demanding. A woman who expresses dissatisfaction risks being seen as dramatic. A woman who rejects a life that should make her happy risks being viewed as selfish. These labels carry weight. They sting in ways that stay lodged beneath the skin. They linger in her mind at night, whispering worst-case scenarios. They remind her of the cost of refusing to perform the gratitude her world expects. Yet beneath that fear sits something even more painful: the guilt of wanting. Guilt for yearning for depth, intimacy, passion, rest, peace. Guilt for dreaming of a life that honors her instead of just impressing others. Guilt for recognizing the distance between what she has and what she needs. It's astonishing how quickly guilt can distort a woman's view of herself. She begins to believe she is ungrateful simply for being human, for feeling unfulfilled, for carrying emotions that contradict the story she's supposed to tell. A quiet disgust sometimes emerges, the kind that comes from recognizing how much of her inner world she abandoned in order to be acceptable. This disgust isn't directed at herself, but at the forces that taught her to shrink, to accommodate, to pretend. It's the disgust of discovering she traded authenticity for approval. Not because she wanted to, but because she believed she had no choice. That moment of recognition can feel devastating. But it's also a turning point, a tearing open of the curtain that once hid the truth. Surprisingly, woven through all this discomfort is a thread of joy. The joy of awareness. The joy of reclaiming a part of herself she didn't realize she'd lost. The joy of seeing the world finally, without the distortion of someone else's expectations. Joy doesn't roar here. It glimmers quietly, like a lantern in a long hallway. It guides her back to herself, one fragile step at a time. Emily felt that glimmer when she caught her reflection in the window, noticing something unfamiliar in her own eyes. It wasn't sadness, though sadness was there. It wasn't anger, though it lingered just beneath the surface. It was something softer, something braver, a kind of knowing. The moment she saw it, her breath hitched. A small, surprising wave of relief ran through her. She wasn't losing her mind. She wasn't ungrateful. She wasn't broken. She was awakening to the truth behind the script she'd been following all her life. That truth is simple, yet profound. Gratitude is meant to be felt, not performed. It was never supposed to replace her other emotions. It was never meant to silence her longing, her ambition, her disappointment. It was never intended to erase her pain. Gratitude was meant to be a companion, not a supervisor. A source of grounding, not a source of guilt. And once she understood that, even faintly, the entire world seemed to shift. The script she had memorized no longer held the same power. She began to sense the possibility of a different narrative, one where gratitude and honesty could coexist, where her emotions didn't compete but collaborated, where the fullness of her humanity wasn't a flaw but a foundation. That possibility stirred something alive in her, something that had been waiting just beneath the surface, patient and unbroken, ready to guide her toward a truth that felt not heavy, but finally, deeply real. Something subtle began to shift in Emily after she recognized the script she'd been following. It wasn't a dramatic awakening or some cinematic moment of clarity. It felt more like a quiet breath she hadn't taken in years. But behind it was a warmth she hadn't expected. A tiny spark of joy at hearing her own voice speak without editing. There was nothing dramatic in her words, nothing poetic, yet they felt revolutionary. For the first time, she wasn't telling herself what she should feel. She was naming what she actually felt. That simple admission opened a door she didn't realize she had locked. That door led to a deeper awareness of duality, something she had always sensed but never allowed herself to fully embrace. Her mind had been trained to choose between gratitude and dissatisfaction, between thankfulness and longing. But her body knew better. It knew that real emotions aren't binaries, they're layers. She began noticing how often conflicting truths lived together inside her. She loved her job's stability, and she hated how drained it left her. She treasured her partner's kindness, and she felt lonely beside him. She appreciated her life's safety, and she hungered for something more alive, more honest, more hers. At first, this duality frightened her. Fear crept in like a cold draft under a closed door. She worried about what it meant to want two things at once, to feel gratitude and discomfort simultaneously. She questioned whether acknowledging both would invite chaos into her life. But the fear didn't last as long as she expected. Something quieter began to replace it, a kind of permission she had never granted herself before. Permission to feel everything without judging it. Permission to let gratitude coexist with disappointment instead of smothering it. The shift didn't happen all at once. It began in small, ordinary moments. A morning when she allowed herself to sit with her coffee in silence rather than rushing into productivity. A conversation where she told her partner she felt overwhelmed instead of masking it with a smile. A day when she noticed the afternoon sun warming her arms as she walked home, and she let herself savor it without demanding that it fix her entire mood. These were tiny instances, but each one felt like a reclaiming of her emotional truth, her autonomy, her humanity. There were moments of anger too, especially when she realized how many years she had denied herself this honesty. Anger at the conditioning that taught her her needs were secondary. Anger at the world that praised her gratitude while ignoring her exhaustion. Anger at herself for believing she had to choose between being grateful and being real. The anger was sharp at times, almost shocking in its intensity, but it wasn't destructive. It was cleansing, like clearing debris after a storm. It made space for clarity. And as that space widened, a surprising joy emerged, one that felt gentler than any she had known. Not the forced joy she had performed for others, but a quiet kind that settled in her chest like a soft hum. She found joy in small acts of self-connection. Journaling without censoring, taking slow walks without rushing, letting herself cry when emotions swelled, laughing without worrying whether it was appropriate. The joy wasn't loud, but it felt real, and that made it powerful. One afternoon, while sitting on her balcony, she noticed the way the breeze moved through the leaves of a tree across the street. The rhythm was simple, almost hypnotic. She felt gratitude rise in her not as an obligation, not as a mask, but as a gentle warmth expanding inside her. Gratitude for the breath in her lungs. Gratitude for the courage it took to be honest. Gratitude for the woman she was becoming, not the one she had performed for so many years. This feeling was small, but unmistakably authentic. It surprised her with its tenderness, and for the first time, gratitude didn't feel heavy. It felt like air. What made these moments meaningful wasn't that they erased her struggles. They didn't. Her job was still stressful. Her relationship still needed work. Her life hadn't suddenly transformed into the dream she once imagined. But something inside her had changed. She had stopped demanding gratitude to fix everything and allowed it to simply exist alongside everything else. Even the disgust she once felt, disgust at the forced positivity, the pressure to appear grateful while ignoring her pain, began to fade. It didn't disappear entirely, but it softened into something more like boundary. She no longer tolerated emotional dishonesty from herself or others. The disgust had served its purpose. Now it loosened its grip, making room for a clearer sense of self-respect. By the time evening fell and the sky shifted from gold to deep blue, Emily felt something she had not felt in years: spaciousness. Inside that spaciousness, gratitude could finally breathe. It no longer competed with her truth. It no longer demanded performance. It no longer weighed her down. It simply lived with her, quiet, real, honest. And in that honesty, she rediscovered a version of herself she thought she had lost. A woman who could tell the truth and still be grateful. A woman who could hold contradictions without collapsing. A woman who could let gratitude be light again, not because she forced it, but because she finally allowed it to flow from a place that felt true. There is a quiet, almost imperceptible shift that happens when a woman begins to live from her truth rather than the script she inherited. It doesn't announce itself with grand revelations or sweeping gestures. It arrives gently, almost shyly, like a dawn that takes its time. Emily felt that shift one morning as she stood by her bedroom window, staring at the soft light spilling over the rooftops. The world outside looked unchanged, yet something within her felt startlingly different. Lighter, steadier, grounded in a way she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't pretending anymore. That was the difference. Gratitude no longer felt like armor she had to wear, or a performance she had to perfect. It had softened into something she could hold without it cutting into her palms. There was relief in that recognition, a kind of subtle joy she hadn't expected. It made her eyes sting in the gentlest way, as if her body needed time to adjust to the absence of a weight she'd carried for far too long. Still, a trace of sadness lingered, not the crushing sadness of being unseen, but a quieter grief for all the years she spent silencing herself. She felt it when she made her morning tea and remembered how many times she had swallowed her truth instead of speaking it. She felt it when she got dressed for work and thought of all the days she had forced gratitude into her tone, even when her heart felt hollow. The sadness wasn't bitter. It was almost tender, honoring the version of herself who had done the best she could with what she knew at the time. What surprised her most was the anger that surfaced alongside the sadness. Not the wild, blistering anger that destroys, but the righteous anger that clarifies. It surfaced when she saw how many women around her still carried that heavy gratitude, unaware of its weight. She noticed a coworker apologizing for being overwhelmed, a friend minimizing her own pain because others have it worse, a woman on the train whispering to her child to just be grateful, even though the little girl's face was wet with tears. Emily felt her chest tighten each time, not with judgment, but with recognition. Those echoes of her former self made anger pulse through her, not at them, but at the culture that had shaped them. Fear still visited her occasionally, slipping into her thoughts when she least expected it. She feared that being honest about her emotions might make her appear selfish or ungrateful. She feared people would misunderstand her new sense of clarity. She feared losing the comfort of old patterns, even if those patterns had suffocated her. But the fear didn't paralyze her anymore. It simply reminded her how deeply the old script had been carved into her. Fear had been a guardrail, keeping her safe in familiar territory. Now it served more as a memory than a warning. One afternoon, while walking home from work, something unexpected happened. Emily paused at a street corner, watching a group of leaves swirl across the pavement in the wind. The moment was small and ordinary, yet she felt gratitude rise in her chest, not forced, not performed, not demanded. It was quiet, effortless, almost instinctive. A gratitude that had nothing to do with comparison or obligation, a gratitude untouched by guilt. It settled in her like a warm exhale. She stood there longer than she intended, letting the feeling spread, amazed by how natural it felt. The more she lived from this new place, the clearer it became that gratitude wasn't meant to be a trophy she displayed for others. It wasn't meant to be proof of her goodness or resilience. It wasn't a sign of moral purity or emotional discipline. Gratitude, in its truest form, was a companion, loyal, undemanding presence that simply arrived whenever her heart felt open enough to notice what was beautiful, comforting, or true. Even the moments of disgust she once felt toward her old patterns took on a new meaning. She no longer saw them as evidence of failure. They became reminders of how deeply she had internalized expectations that were never hers to hold. Disgust transformed into discernment, helping her identify what no longer fit in her life. She learned to say no without apologizing. She learned to speak honestly without cushioning her words with unnecessary sweetness. She learned to set boundaries that protected her emotional honesty rather than forcing her into performances of gratitude that weren't genuine. Joy began to arrive differently, no longer in bursts she had to chase, but in steady waves that showed up in unlikely places. In the taste of warm bread, in the way her friend laughed with her whole body, in the stillness of early mornings when the world had not yet made any demands on her, in the way she allowed herself to rest without justification. Joy felt less like an escape and more like a homecoming. Emily noticed the change in her relationships as well. When she expressed discomfort or sadness, she no longer wrapped it in layers of apology. She spoke plainly, softly, truthfully. And something magical happened. The right people responded with care instead of defensiveness. The wrong people drifted away without drama. Her life became more honest because she had become more honest. She had made room for authenticity, and authenticity attracted what was real. As weeks passed, she realized something profound. Gratitude, when free from pressure, wasn't light because life had become perfect. It was light because she no longer used it to hide her imperfections. It grew alongside her truth instead of replacing it. It expanded with her vulnerability instead of suffocating it. One evening, she sat on her balcony with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The city glowed below her, a soft hum of lights and distant voices. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. A single thought rose within her, gentle and sincere. I am grateful for the woman I am becoming. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a performance. It was a truth rooted in her healing. And perhaps that is what gratitude was meant to be all along. Not a command, not a mask, not a weight, but a quiet place inside us where honesty and hope meet, without pressure, without fear, and without apology. If you've ever felt the heaviness of forced gratitude, your story matters here. And if there's even one small moment you can acknowledge today, one breath, one softness, one flicker of real gratitude, you're not moving backward. You're coming home to yourself.